Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar, Adapt or Be Outpaced, How Leading Enterprises Are Scaling Agentic AI. I'm Laura Bithell, Senior Commercial Content Editor at Raconteur, and I'll be your host for this timely discussion brought to you in partnership with Salesforce. Today, we're diving into one of the most significant developments in enterprise technology, agentic AI. This new class of AI can plan, adapt, and act with minimal supervision. And as businesses strive for better efficiency and agility, it presents great opportunities and some challenges. To look at how enterprises can safely implement agentic AI at scale and why there's an urgency to do so, I'm joined by a panel of industry experts. Maxime Vermeer, Director of AI Strategy at Abbey, Cameron Williams, Head of Technology Architecture at Acre Pharmacy, and Robert Whittaker, Vice President and CIO for Industry Go-to-Market, UKI and APAC at Salesforce. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to begin by, asking quite a big question. In your view, what makes agentic AI potentially transformative for enterprises? And perhaps, Robert, I will start with you.
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me is it's really the first technology that's really actually going to make us change and truly transform our business. Like if you think back through the previous technology shifts, the internet just allowed us to connect ourselves more. Cloud, we just moved software from one sort of on-premise to a different form of hosting. Mobile was about remote. This sort of technology means we have to truly look at the processes and the business processes and the people and the way we actually work. And that's going to require us just to truly do transformation rather than just shift technologies along the way. It is going to bring more attention to areas in particular where we're using unstructured data that we've probably never really been able to leverage in transformations in the past. We've always gone back to that relational, very structural transactional data in there. And it's also going to have to look beyond just the technology in there and look at the people structures and the way we work there. That's sort of some of the initial views, but I welcome other people's views in the discussion.
Well, I would definitely say that's hitting the nail on the head, Robert. Because at Abbey we've been working on process intelligence for quite some time to identify what these processes look like. So I fully agree with your statement that now it's all going to be about how does a process actually work and how can we make it sure that it becomes better for everybody that's involved in that process. And I think it immediately also highlights exactly what the technology is going to, I would say, identify in the organizations that are going to go down this path and see if they can leverage the technology. But the technology will point them back squarely right at themselves to figure out, okay, do we actually know how our organization works? And it's not just about the unstructured data or having the data, it's also about understanding how your process is meant to work and how people actually execute it. So it's going to be an interesting journey for a lot of organizations, in my opinion.
And probably to your point, the process, like reimagining processes, a lot of these processes have been around in businesses 50, 60 years. Like it's the first time having to sort of unpack some of those processes that were written by generations before us that no one has ever looked at. I think that's another interesting part in here.
That's just how we do it, is the thing that we're going to hear a lot.
What about you, Cameron? Does that kind of resonate with you?
Yeah, to be honest, it really does. Like, we're obviously a relatively new company in terms of how long we've been operating, and we've been lucky enough to do everything on the one platform and really build our processes from the ground up. But that means that with agentic AI, it's perfect for us just for scaling the processes in terms of we'll be able to scale and make sort of small improvements, minor improvements, will make a massive difference based on using an agent just to support you through that process and support our internal staff members.
Yeah, it's interesting. Part of the title of this session is Adapt or Be Outpaced. And I wondered kind of to each of you, I guess, how urgent you think it is for enterprises to explore agentic AI and kind of jump on the, I guess, bandwagon and what's kind of driving that urgency in adoption. Perhaps Max, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, so it's interesting to ask that question because especially considering because there's already been so many technological shifts over the last couple of years that for enterprises, whether that's smaller organizations or very large organizations, it's been a lot from a technology perspective. There's been a lot of value being presented, and I think the complexity is, okay, which part of this is right for us? Which part of it is actually going to make our processes better and actually will have an impact for the customers that all of us serve? You're an organization to actually provide services or products to your end customers. How will that actually change? And I think it's been an interesting journey that a lot of customers have been on to find out, okay, we have the technology on the one side, but what is the actual value it's going to deliver? And how can we map that one to one? So, when you're getting to that particular topic, it's really making sure that there is a driver behind it that is actually looking for new and better ways to deliver business, and not just to deliver impact through technology for the sake of technology. And that's something that we continue to say, from our perspective, is use AI with a purpose. And that's just any AI. I think agentic AI is absolutely amazing. And I think we'll dive a little bit deeper into all the things it can do. But there's a lot of organizations that are still at that starting point of the journey, that don't have all their ducks in a row like Cameron, because they're in multiple systems. They've been around for 35 years or more. And they still have an AS400 running somewhere that has no idea what agentic or AI is. So that makes for very complex type of migrations and technological advances that these organizations have to go through before they can get to that point.
Yeah, to be honest, I think in terms of the urgency to keep up with what's going on with agentic AI is all about giving the customer and giving even other businesses that you deal with the experience they now expect. Because we have AI in every aspect of life now, that people expect that top level service, they expect that quick turnaround, they expect someone to be able to deal with their problems instantly. And if you aren't providing that to them, they will find someone who will. And it's all about, in terms of technology, it's always best to be at the forefront, but you can't sort of think that, oh, as a company, we are leading the way into technology, so we've got a bit of time on this AI thing. But you want to keep ahead. You want to make sure that you're pushing forward so everybody's playing catch up to you. And I think in terms of agentic AI for us, it just basically means that we adapt that into our company. We are then still sticking to what we do as a company, which is we put tech first because that is the way that every business is going.
I completely agree on that point around the consumer, because this is really the first technology transformation where the consumer had the technology before business, and it's sort of we're having to do it the opposite way around. As someone that meet with a lot of organizations, that comment around speed and just a trend of what I've seen over the last sort of 18 months. If I say 18 months ago, boards and CEOs were sort of going, I need to be able to demonstrate I'm doing something with AI, whether it be I'm doing a study tour, I'm doing a proof of concept, trying stuff out. Seen a considerable shift over the last probably 3 to 6 months. And they're not just asking questions now. We just got to be demonstrating we're doing something with AI. We need to be demonstrating we're driving value with AI. So they're really challenging back to their teams going, yeah, it's great you've spent X dollars and you've done this great experiment and proof of concept, but how's that improving my productivity? How's that improving my revenue along the way? And that shift has happened a lot faster than probably anyone's really expected. I wrote this paper the start of last year on like how we saw the evolution of AI, and we saw it in 3 phases: renovate, evolve, and transcend. Like renovate was going to be you're just going to embed AI in your existing systems and processes, and you're going to play around there a little bit. Evolve was this period now where we're going to see these concept of digital colleagues starting to augment and do action for you. And then transcend was going to be new business models and all those aspects there. I remember saying this like start of last year, we'll be in that renovate phase for probably 2 to 3 years, and then probably, maybe 5 years before we start to see new business models. Well, that was March. In August, we started to see digital agents and colleagues come out. Like, it's this pace at which that has happened has been phenomenal. And probably by the end of this year, we'll start to see new business models on AI start to come through. So I think people that don't want to act now, you're going to be out of a business. And you look at the pace of when the iPhone was launched and when Uber, like whoever would have thought Uber would have replaced taxis and the BlackBerry and all of those aspects there, just, that was 18 months, 2 years after those technologies come. So people should be learning those lessons.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. It has moved so quickly. And it was interesting what you say there about consumers using it first. I guess also the rest of the company using it first, not just sort of tech teams, which has kind of spurred that urgency. You touched there on kind of, moving through the phases. I guess a lot of, AI conversations are quite hypothetical, partly because it's moving so fast. I would be really interested to hear about some real use cases of agentic AI kind of right now. Perhaps, Cameron, if I come to you first, I know you said you're quite early on in your journey, but could you perhaps share a agentic AI use case that's showing real traction or value so far in your business?
Yeah, so to be honest, we started with probably the most obvious one to start with, which was basically a customer service agent. Um, on the surface would look much like your traditional chatbot on a website, but the fact that it can take action and actually service the customer without having to get a human involved at the point where it's, oh, I can't help you with this now, I'll have to pass you to someone who can. And it actually takes that action. We've done it in a very simple way of we're an online pharmacy. People need to create prescriptions to check out an order. We are using that agent to assist in that process and actually take action of requesting the prescription, or if someone needs to make a simple change to delivery date or delivery method, they can do that directly from the agent, which is deflecting people from having to pick up the phone and talk to our customer service team, which means that they can spend more time. We've actually changed our customer service team to a combined customer sort of account management team because they've now got that extra time available from dealing with queries to make sure that customers are happy in their account and can do sales. And it's purely from that agentic AI agent actually taking action. And we're actually seeing this is just the fresh data is 55% less calls into the office, whereas we've actually doubled the business in that same time frame. So you'd expect double the calls, but with half the calls. So we're actually really at 25% of inbound calls of what we'd expect. And that's just our first use case. And then we're really developing now in terms of actually placing them orders for the customer through the agentic AI agent.
Robert and Max, you're working with kind of clients. Are you seeing that kind of as the first use case? What kind of areas are you seeing people sort of
I've
looking to?
definitely seen a lot of customer support use cases. In financial, like I spend a lot of time with financial services and banks. The other one I see a lot is around the whole pre-meeting prep, the like preparation for a meeting, doing the meeting, the post-meeting follow-up. That's where a lot of particularly relationship manager roles are leveraging AI. To drive productivity of those bankers, salespeople along the way. Just in that pre-meeting prep, the customers that have implemented are seeing 60 to 90 minute savings per meeting. And that's just let's build the briefing document, pulling all the data together of what's the conversation, what are the points I need to do. Little known before you get to the whole, let's take the transcript notes, record it, take actions, and follow up all those actions off the back of it. And they're doing it in pretty quick timelines. Like you're seeing timelines of 6, 12 weeks to get from start to those in there. And that's like considerable value. And interestingly, that most of the ones I've talked to, they're not banking those as operational savings, sort of like Cameron's story. They're putting them back into growing the business and yeah, really driving that forward. It's also a nice use case for the regulated industries where potentially a regulator is not ready to sign off you having AI agents to serve direct to customers. At least you've still got a human in the loop and makes people comfortable there. But that's a really common one.
Yeah, I would definitely say that we're seeing a lot of usage first, low-hanging fruit on the personal productivity side. From an Abby perspective, we work more on, driving these types of use cases at scale that really transform end-to-end processes and not just personal productivity. So an example of something that we've done where we empowered the agents with the ability to understand documents as well as how the processes are meant to work is in logistics optimization. So through the ability to actually interpret shipping documents, dangerous good declarations, how that process works, and identifying the spots where something is not going the way that you expect it to go, and highlighting that to an agent so they can go take action. I think that's the beauty of the whole technology in itself, is that you can give it a specific problem that you've seen within the process and actually have it take action. So they was able to then, based off of all of that really complex unstructured data, about both the process and all the documents involved, because transportation logistics is such a document-driven process, that it was able to replan delivery routes and actually reduce delays and costs. And it's those types of use cases that we see our customers now really focusing on, where before the technology was there too, but it was a much more complex process where you needed to have COEs, where you need to have very technical teams to be able to go and deploy those at scale. But now with agentic AI, it's very easy and a much easier process, especially when you have your agents plugged into other auxiliary tools and technologies that can really deliver the types of components that they need to be successful.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting that it is lots of people can be, using this technology, and I guess that comes probably with its great opportunities, but also I'd be interested to look at kind of the challenges perhaps around agentic AI. This is quite a big question, but what are those biggest sort of challenges, be it kind of practical or ethical when scaling agentic AI, and how have you addressed them within your own organizations, but also with clients? Cameron, I'd be quite interested to hear your take on this, especially given the kind of ethical complexity of your sector.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, when you first mentioned AI obviously we're a pharmaceutical distributor, we're an online pharmacy, we've got to make sure that our data is safe, clean, we're using it in the correct way. And we've also got to limit the actions the agentic AI can take purely on the fact that there needs to be that human sign off in a lot of our process. We have a responsible person that it's their job to put their name against every decision that's made to make sure that it's being checked thoroughly. But what we can do with the agentic AI is basically do a lot of that legwork for them. And the way that we work all our data in Salesforce, we know that the AI has got access to the fields and the data store, so it can make them informed decisions and it can present it in a way that, look, we've checked every part of this. We know it's now ready for your sign off. And it's got that still that human touch, that final sign off, but it's done all the legwork for that person. And that's really where it's important for us. And on the ethical side, the best thing about Agentforce is the way it anonymizes all the data before it goes into the model. And then it comes back out in a response that that data is safe. It lives within our org. The profiles, permission sets we've got set up are all safe and they're acting on the agent. So for us, there was no other question of what AI model to use. We know what's safe. We've got it in our system. It looks at our data. We're using it every day. So it sort of removed that worry of the ethical side of it for us. But it's something that you've always got to think about, especially in our industry.
I was just going to just follow on from Cameron's bit, like you just referred to some of the built-in elements with Agentforce. At Salesforce, we do everything based on our core values of, trust and equality. And I think, having those values built into the platform, when we started this AI journey, we went back to our values. When it came to trust, we knew the customers, you're going to have to secure PII data. We know that customers are not going to want their data to go out into models and be trained and used elsewhere. In there, we've got to look for toxicity and masking. So we put a lot of effort into that in the platform because we knew that was so fundamental to people like Cameron and using it. But over on top of that, we have an Office of Ethical and Humane Use. So they're always looking at, well, how are we building software? How is it going to use to ensure that it's going to be used in the right way, and we put the right controls in the place. So that's just sort of probably how that's bit that Cameron sort of was talking about, how that came to life in the product and capability, and all customers can leverage that same level of trust and security that Cameron has benefited from.
There's a very practical side to it as well. If you look at purely the technological practical side, especially again in organizations that have been around, you still have siloed data, you have unstructured data bottlenecks and all of those. But if we're focusing on the compliance side, if you think about the AI acts that are coming into effect in multiple regions across the world, there's a whole level of transparency, and I love what Robert was talking about, that actually you as a consumer of artificial intelligence are also going to have to convey to your consumer of your product. So at some point, Cameron's going to have to explain to his customers at somewhere how he's actually leveraging Agentforce and agentic AI and everything else that is coming and optimizing their processes. But you're going to have that full chain. So from a compliance aspect, there's a lot of, I would say, emphasis on the control level, the autonomous control level. And like Cameron already talked about, we have all of these things that they can and cannot do. So that's something that we help our customers with as well, to deliver that kind of helicopter view of your agents, because they are, in fact, if you look at from a compliance angle, they're operators of your organization, and you don't want them doing something that's going outside of the binds of what another human operator would actually do. So those types of same controls have to be put in place to make sure that you, at the end of the day, have the accountability and the traceability, and most of all, the transparency that you're going to have to be obligated to provide to your end customers as well.
Yeah, we have, obviously, as a pharmacy, we process patient data. So we've got to make sure that only authorized people in our organization have access to that data. And that's the same for the agentic AI. We make sure that that does not have access to that data, because it's got to stay compliant. And our customers, we're selling to businesses that are then treating the patient. They want to know that we're looking after their data and we're looking after their patient's data. So they want to be able to communicate to their customers that it's 100% secure and that their data is safe. So that's why it's so important to use an AI tool that has them guardrails in place that are easily set up and you can trust.
Yeah, and it's exactly those kind of capabilities that we help our customers with, to have that oversight across what's going on. And again, especially if you're having to deal with multiple systems that are working together, that becomes a really complex task. And it's a perfect example of what Cameron said.
Yeah, it's interesting there. I think what you said as well, Max, around, they are an extension of your workforce. There's definitely been a few kind of high profile cases, haven't there, of, being cases around, I think it was an airline where they said, oh, it was our chatbot that said this, it wasn't us. But yeah, there's a lot of that kind of going on. So I guess everyone's learning and adapting, but the most important part is to have those guardrails in place and to make sure that it's really clear what you're doing with people's data, and that you are, I guess, taking responsibility for anything that you share and put out there. Robert, I was kind of interested to just know, obviously you have a lot of experience in financial services, and that's obviously a regulated area. Are there any particular, I guess, concerns or things you've had to put in place there with those kind of industries in terms of, guardrails around agentic AI?
Yeah, a lot of the elements we built into sort of that trust layer that we just talked about on camera and have come from those regulated industries like financial services. Like when we went to financial services, here's AI, and they're going, there's no way we're ever going to do this in our business. Like the compliance people just would say, there is no way. But then you start working through, it's like, well, we've just proven we can secure your data, your PII data. We've got traceability, auditability, like all the things we look for in a normal solution are the things that, you work through with the compliance. And, there was one customer we did that with. The compliance officer, said there is no way AI will ever be used in this organization over my dead body. After we went through and talked through, here's all the controls that we've built into the underlying platform. He actually said, why would I ever let a person talk to a customer without having AI check the answer before it goes back? Like that's how much, because he was comfortable with the controls and he's seeing the responses. That was, well, actually those controls are actually stronger than our human controls that we have today. So that's sort of the shifts that we're really seeing there. And like when it comes to particularly agentic platforms, like, a number of times I have the conversation and a customer go, I've got an LLM. I'm all sorted. Like, how can I get started with agentic? And it's all these elements of like, how are you going to solve all these security issues, permissions, auditability? How are you going to test it? How are you going to bring and connect your data? Like all of those elements, you either have to go and solve all those as well, or you go and embed a platform in your organization like Cameron has, leverage off all of that sort of hard, non-rewarding work, and get to the cool stuff to put the agent live to customers in quick time. I'll probably call those out.
That's such an interesting switch to go from saying I'll never use it at all to saying actually we couldn't possibly not have AI check this. I'd be interested to kind of hear from all of you, I guess, around that relationship between, humans checking things and AI, and how you're kind of equipping teams or advising people equip their teams to work alongside, autonomous AI agents, and I guess why it is so important to have a human in the loop the whole way.
Maybe I'll go from my perspective real quick because Abby's been working on artificial intelligence for more than 30 years, specifically focused on how organizations can leverage the unstructured data that's locked away inside of their documents, amongst other things. And so we've always had this concept of human in the loop, because the unstructured information also has to be validated and has to be confirmed before it ends up in the actual ERP system, CRM, and your system of record. So that's always been very important. At every single step of the way, we've always tried to optimize that in a way that the amount of manual effort that is required on a customer side is reduced to a bare minimum. And actually, I think this is a level of freedom that customers will still be looking for as to what do we want to verify? What are we legally bound to actually verify? And what are things that we just as an organization care about very deeply? So you need to have those different levels available to you in an organization to say, okay, this is something that we definitely want to have a look at before it reaches the next step within the process. Overall, I think that the combination of the capabilities that agents offer and making them available in different versions, like we talked about with personal productivity, that is great. You can have co-pilots, you can have agents helping you through a customer service process or a claims process. That can be both on the back end or on the front end. And then on the other side, you have the more larger scale where it's actually full-on automations that are fully autonomously working and delivering the entire process on themselves without any type of intervention. But I think it's striking that balance between which process is right for which type of usage of not just agentic AI, but just AI or just technology in itself. That is a clear kind of thinking exercise that organizations need to do before they actually start on that journey for that particular process.
I just add, like on the human in the loop, we were very public saying there'll always be a human in the loop with AI. We are starting to see that AI is now starting to be able to take action without a human in the loop, particularly in those customer service scenarios. If I just look at, how we use it just for our customers, in our support side, we've now done, I think it's about 750,000 conversations with customers through our AI without a human intervention in that process. And 85% of those conversations have been resolved without a human ever touching or being handed off to those cases in there. And that's just between sort of November and now. So you're seeing more and more of those sort of examples starting to pop in where people are getting comfortable with the AI, with the results. They'll always start off with a human in the loop and, make sure they get comfortable. Once they're there, that's where you'll start to see action. I think, Cameron, your example probably fits nicely in that as well. You're assuming your experience has been a bit like that.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I sort of see it working in two ways. There's the human in the loop, which is for things where it's regulatory and you need that final sign off. But like I said, it's the AI is doing the legwork. It's 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 a support tool, is what we use it as, especially on the regulatory side, the quality aspects of our business. Our quality department are now using the AI to do the legwork, get the document ready, and it's the human with the final sign off. Whereas on the actual like commercial side, the business processes, taking orders, processing orders, we're happy for the agents to take action. We've got the guardrails in place, the data's in one place, it's checking a field, and it's basically moving on to the next step based on the result. And it can go to that endpoint of taking that action where there's no human involved. And that's really where we're seeing the value in terms of improving efficiency so they can spend time on other tasks because they don't have to do that task. But then there's also the aspect of people becoming so much quicker and more accurate doing the important quality tasks that they're able to spend more time making sure it's right. And it's again, that passes on to the end user in our case, which is always the patient. And as a company, our main focus is always patient safety. So if we've got more time to make sure that that patient safety is top priority, it's only going to be a benefit for everybody involved, whether that's for assisting and a human having a sign off or actually taking action based on the data that they've got available.
Do you think there'll be, I suppose, aspects of the business that are purely, run by AI, and then there'll be aspects that are going to be purely human, and there'll be some sort of Venn diagram in the middle where they meet?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of departments, I don't think it'll ever replace a department, but I think certain roles that people take day to day will easily be able to shift them over to AI. And it just means that people can focus on the focus of the business at the end of the day is improve efficiency to improve turnover and profit. And if we can do that while keeping all our core values, I don't see a reason why we would not shift to some roles and some tasks being pure AI.
Well, I would actually say that we're already seeing those kind of use cases where it is full on AI that is actually doing the entire process within, for example, actually, it's a compliance use case. It's a really cool one where one of our customers is leveraging our capabilities to then automate the process around compliance for um, specific regulations in the US related to actually providing data to the regulators on lease agreements. So very unstructured types of documents, very complex. And they actually had 30 FTEs working on the particular process alone. And now they've been able to fully automate that because they had all of that trust, they had of that capability to then provide all of the data points and the interpretation all through agentic AI plus Abby's capabilities and turn that into something that is now fully automated and running with 99.9% accuracy. There's always the 0.1% that you have to talk about because it's never fully perfect. But the funny part is, when they were doing it with those 30 FTEs, they only had 50% accuracy in a compliance use case. So you can see that there's benefits. And again, it kind of brings me back to my earlier point that you got to pick the right use case to fit these technologies into and make sure that you're actually thinking about what you're trying to achieve.
Max, would you say that using agentic AI, it sort of removes sort of the barriers that were in place by having data in different systems and unstructured data, because you are now able to access that data through the agentic AI and use it? Because in my opinion, one of the big things about AI was when it first came, well, not when it first came out, but when it got big again, it was all
Mhm.
about you need to be AI ready, you need your data sorted. That's the main task. Whereas from how you're describing it, it's like we don't actually need to be in that situation because the AI will take care of that for you.
Yeah, so I think that is partially true, I would say. I think the main driver that I'm seeing at least is that the complexity of the setup process, the actual building of the automation and all the steps that go into it is becoming so much easier. Where you used to have, RPA or an iPaaS, all the different tools that you then had to indeed plug into the data. And that was a complexity in itself to be able to translate all of those different structures into one thing that you could then take throughout that entire process. But I think you're right. Part of the solution to that particular problem is it's now becoming very easy to say to an agent, hey, there's this API. I have no idea how it works, but I'm sure you can figure it out. And then just pass it on to the next one. So I think it's a cause and effect kind of thing where what you're saying is absolutely true. But I think it comes from the removed barrier of complexity of the technology. So now more people can actually do it. And especially the people that were used to the complexity are moving at lightning speed and rolling these things out.
And Max, I think the technology is also improved as well with like the integration, standards like MCP is making it easier to remove
For
those barriers
sure.
going forward. So I think, Cameron, I think you correct, everyone was like, we've got to get the data sorted, but I think the technology's now advanced to sort of solve and make that a bit easier to plug the tech to fix the data and integration problems up front.
I suppose one thing I was just thinking while, you were talking is that for all of this, as well as you said, maybe human in the loop, maybe not, to get people up to speed and to make sure that, as you say, people are kind of used to that change and used to being able to kind of adapt. There's a change management piece here, isn't there? How do you think, companies can go about making sure that everyone is ready to kind of adapt to what is a very impressive pace of technological change?
I'll jump in here. There's probably a few pieces. You've got to get people comfortable using AI tools in their normal day of work. Bringing those tools in from they're using it in their consumer land into the day of work. You've got to have and you've got to have leaders to support that. Like leaders got to support that behavior. Saying you can't use AI in the business, we're going to block it all, is not going to help them be ready for AI. And then as you implement AI solutions in your processes, you've got to bring the users on the journey. The number of organizations I've talked to and the end users, they're skeptical. They just think leadership is just trying to, they're going to lose their jobs. They're just trying to drive efficiencies in the place. But when you've taken those users on the journey, and then they see like the benefits it can have for them day to day, that it's actually for them and it makes their life easier, that's where you get the adoption, and they don't think it's just leadership just trying to cut costs this time around, a new way of doing that there.
I would definitely echo that, because I think the main point of what you said, Robert, is look at what the process is and take those users on that journey with you. And I would even go a step further, is to actually going through the process of identifying what the process currently look like, so you can even show them how it will improve exactly what they're going to get at the end of the line. And that is something that is becoming increasingly important, right? I think we saw a lot of disillusionment, a couple of years back, and I think this is exactly what you guys were referring to as well. You have to get your data right, or you couldn't get the POC to actually be successful. You had to do so many steps. But I think now we're getting back to the actual value that customers want to see, which is, hey, we have this process. I know you have technology. I'm sure we can get it to work, but I'd love to know where I'm actually going to end up, so that we don't get to this point again where we actually go through disillusionment again. And we have to go back to management or to our customers and say, we have failed, which is not something as an organization that you want to do in this time and age.
And I
I see
think
Cameron nodding a lot, so I guess he agrees.
I was going to say, Max, that comment around value, I think, is so important. I think when this whole AI revolution started, we had technology and we were trying to find a problem to solve that use the technology with. I think as we're seeing now, people are now starting with where's the business value, what's the outcome I want to drive to, and that's where you're seeing the wins and the success stories, rather than let's go into
Yeah.
new technology.
We suddenly had a really big hammer and trying to find something to use it for. And now it's the other way around. We're trying to find exactly what it's necessary for and using it as a precision tool. So that's great.
Yeah, that's spot on. And to be honest, I think that's what we've done in terms of speaking to the individual user in the role and find out exactly what help they need and what process they can see it helping them with and where it can assist them, and then using it in a way that is there to improve them. And at the end of the day, it's there to make everybody better at the job. And if you're better at your job, you can spend more time doing things that are better for the company, but also improve yourself moving forward. It's all about developing the individuals as well as the business. And I think using the AI for that is really what will drive the end user. If they can see it making themselves better at the job because it's assisting them and improving their output, there's a lot better buy-in.
You mentioned there about kind of outcomes and making sure that there's a real business case. We've touched on it a little bit as we've gone through, but obviously teams rolling out this technology are going to be asked to prove its worth. How do you all kind of measure success when deploying new things like agentic AI, and how do you, I guess, have clients sort of saying they're going to measure success from it?
I would say, just on that, it really depends on what you like. It's what are you trying to achieve? Like, focus on your business outcome, not a technology experiment. And I think you've had a lot of organizations have really focused on it as a technology experiment and have not got the return. It's the ones that have really looked, well, this is the outcome I want to solve. It just happens that the technology answer is generative AI to solve this, and having really strong business cases in there. The benefit is, like, you look at some of these processes, you don't have to do small changes, and it's really big benefits, and they pay back really quickly. And it's self-fulfilling. You get that first one up, it pays for probably your next 10 use cases as you go through there. And you just to think about that mindset around probably that little bit more business value led dimension.
Yeah, I would agree. And we try to help our customers in doing that by leveraging AI in itself to actually help them map out those processes. And like I talked about, identify, okay, this is currently what it's costing us to run this process at each and every step of the way. And if we make tweaks and changes, we do that through the simulation of, hey, if we change the process, how will it then actually run? You can see where you're going to end up at the end. But to answer your question specifically, what is the measure of success? To Robert's point, that really differs. In the use case I talked about earlier, it was the compliance rate. It didn't really matter if the process were more expensive or cheaper. It was all about that we were hitting on those compliance notes. In other cases, I think I can definitely imagine that in Cameron's case, for some of his processes, it will be about speed. The faster we can get our product to where it needs to be, that is exactly what I would love to have. But there's also going to be other instances where it's like, no, it doesn't matter about the speed. It's about the type of quality we can deliver. So it really depends on exactly the type of process that you're looking at.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in terms of outcome, it's all about, I think you should look at the agentic AI as what business outcome are we getting from this? What business value are we getting from this? Rather than what can this technology do and let's try and make it work. In terms of our first use case of the customer service agent, the service agent deflected 50% of inbound messages, and we've had a 25, we're now using 25% of our customer service team. So straight away there, you've got your value back, and then they can now drive better quality time and focus on sales and pushing things that are going to improve the business. So in my eyes, it's all about the business outcome. And if you put them in place for each agentic AI you have, that's more where you're going to see the value. Completely agree with Max on the compliance. In our quality team, it's not about speed. It's about making sure that we're compliant, everything's right, regulations are fully met, so that if we have an inspection, they look at it and go, everything's perfect here. And if we're doing that quicker, we've got more time to spend on it. It's better all around for us.
We're talking about, I guess, leading companies and what they can do here. I wonder, and this could be a question to all of you, although I wonder if Cameron, you'll say your own industry, if there are any industries that are kind of leading with particularly exciting use cases at the moment that maybe others could learn from. Perhaps Robert, I'll come to you as you probably are seeing quite a few different industry case studies.
Yeah, like I would say that probably the areas like retail and consumer goods are probably a little bit more advanced. Like, yeah, they're a little bit more innovative and adopting this a little bit faster, mainly because of the regulatory environment they have, and they're typically in a direct-to-consumer facing environment. Like they're a more digital bit, they're naturally a more digital business there. So that's probably where we see them the most. We are seeing areas like the regulated industries, the health, the financial services, particularly in the employee sort of agent, the ones that are sort of human in the loop, they're rapidly catching up. Like that pre-post meeting example, yeah, if you're a relationship manager in banking, I would expect by the end of the year, like that's going to be just table stakes, that sort of AI use case. If you're not doing it, well, your competitors are, you better get on the bandwagon. That's sort of showing the speed there. Those customer service agents, we're seeing quite a lot across a lot of the industries as well from a level one maturity.
In terms of my industry, sort of pharmaceutical, pharmacy, as an industry, we're probably quite far behind, purely for the fact that people are scared to use it. The issue we have being a pharmacy is that we have customers, even from the B2, we basically have two separate customer types, but even from the B2B side to clinics who then service the patient, they have much of a consumer mindset. So they're expecting that consumer experience. So they are expecting to deal with AI on a daily basis. So it's more of our customers are driving us to sort of keep up because that's what they expect. Even though it's not a standard within our industry, we need to make sure that we're delivering the customer with what they need. But I do think as a whole in our industry, we're probably quite far behind in terms of other industries, especially retail, where there isn't regulation in terms of our AI journey.
Yeah, I think if I would agree that there are certain industries that are moving faster than others. I think one that I'm very excited about is the work that we're doing within transportation logistics. I think they saw a huge amount of disruption through COVID, and it was a hard lesson. So I think they're emphasizing a lot. We just recently helped a customer to transform their process for customs clearance. Again, also after COVID, you had Brexit. They had a lot of complexities that they have now to deal with, and we were able to run that down from hours into minutes, and this was fast moving consumer goods. So they literally had their product sit in a warehouse because of that whole process, and they could not sell them anymore. So we changed that. I think on the other side, what I'm really most excited about is kind of an extension what Cameron was saying, is that in healthcare, I'm now starting to see that kind of industry open itself up to the capabilities of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of work that will go into it around the compliance side. Again, this is the most, I would say, impactful one, but also it's the most dangerous one if things were to go wrong. But that has gotten me very excited about the possibility that, with the right necessary kind of boundaries and guardrails in place, how that could transform basically across the world, how a lot of people receive care in the future.
Yeah, I suppose it's very exciting for those industries where they could really, see huge improvements. But as you say, there's an awful lot of kind of steps to get there with something like healthcare, or indeed, some of the ones we were speaking about earlier, like financial services. Um, I wanted to just kind of, I guess, as a final question, um, ask what is maybe a bit of a crystal ball gazing question. But to each of you, I guess, what do you think is the most exciting kind of upcoming trend that enterprises need to be preparing for as this technology evolves? Um, Perhaps I will go back to you, Max.
So you added the word exciting, which kind of made me change my answer, but I'll go for the one that I think is the thing that people should be watching, and that is the trust and compliance side of artificial intelligence. I continuously emphasize this because I see a lot of the value that can be created, but with a lot of regulation, and regulation is always complex coming into place, you're going to have to think about that side of it as well. It's not the exciting side, but it's something that I think is critically important to future success and being able to continue to roll out new innovation within your organization. So you might as well get ahead of it. This is exactly what we're doing in our organization as well as a technology builder, is working through the whole model risk management process of actually being able to deliver all of that transparency to our customers ahead of time, even before regulation requires it from us. If you're asking me about, the more exciting part, I think the way that we will get to a point where Star Trek becomes a reality and we will able to just ask what needs to be asked and the computer executes, that's what I'm looking forward to. And I think all in all, for some things, we are not that far off.
All right, maybe Cameron, I'll ask you the one they should be looking at and then the most exciting. Let's have both.
Well, to be honest, I've got to agree with Max in terms of the compliance and the trust. That is really what I'm excited for. And if we can get that in place relatively soon, which I think we're there, it's just a case of putting the time in to get it right. I see the AI basically passing one process to the next job, to the next job, working across departments and getting us that end result without human intervention at all. I'm talking about things like when deliveries arrive, doing analysis and all paperwork, delivery notes, temp controls, and giving us the green light to put that stock in with all the information before we even have a human touch the system. To me, that is what's really exciting to us. Knowing it's compliant and also taking care of a lot of the legwork is what will drive our business. And I'm pretty sure 90% of businesses forward quicker than they ever expected to.
Great. And last but not least, Robert.
They're probably along similar lines, probably match the category. The one probably to watch out for, it's line that's along the lines of compliance, but it's more the cyber threat. So this technology is advancing quite rapidly. Just don't think it's us that the good side has always got these technologies. The deep fakes you can get now, a lot of our traditional controls in our contact centers on our digital side haven't been designed for these threats. Like someone can replicate your voice now. Someone can do those items there. So those traditional controls won't work anymore. So you do have to be on top of that. You do need to be leveraging platforms that like you want technology that are investing in those areas. If you think you can outbuild the hackers, you're in for a shock there. The more exciting one, to Max's point, is really around voice. To date, particularly our agent force, it's all text-based at the moment. When you can start having conversations with it. I know there's one customer that says he wants all his calls to be answered by AI voice by a certain time frame. That's going to be a game changer in terms of how we engage with this technology and all the other sort of business processes and use cases that will just open up as a result. And to Max's point, it's not that far away in here.
If you can answer an inbound call with voice, is there no reason why you can't do an outbound call with voice? And you've got access to the data you need. AI could be selling for businesses within who knows how long. It could be round the corner.
It feels very sci-fi, but perhaps not that far off. Well, I think that's a really poignant point to end on. A huge thank you to you all for sharing your perspectives on adopting agentic AI and I guess what it takes to really get it right. Thank you so much for your time.